Hi, it's Madeline. I hope you're all having a great day wherever you are. So today's tutorial is for this chunky boho style bookmark. Once you've learned the braid stitch, it's actually really quick as you're only doing a few stitches per row. And I have all the materials and other hints in the description below. I really hope you enjoy, and please remember to like and subscribe if you do. So enough talking and let's get started. So we'll start with a slip knot. Then we're going to chain 12, keeping the chains nice and loose because this will make it much easier on the next row. Now once you have your 12 chains, count back 5 chains from the loop on your hook. So you're going to be working into the 5th chain back from your hook. So once you've got this, yarn over and go straight into that 5th chain, pull through, yarn over and put in a double crochet. So at the top of this double crochet you're going to chain 1 and then we're going to put in the puff stitch for the braid. So here you've got your 3 down the side that will act as your end double crochet. It doesn't count as a double crochet, but it's the 3 chains, and you yarn over and go into the 4th one. So that is the one that is just before that 5th chain where you worked the double crochet. So yarn over, go into that chain, pull through and pull up. So make sure you pull up your work so you keep that particular strand loose. Now when you go back in, you want to keep a bit of tension on the hook. So I like to put my finger on the hook and keep tension at the bottom, yarn over each time and pull through and pull up to the height. And I'm going to repeat this 4 times in total. Now once you've done that 4 times, you're going to yarn over, turn your hook downwards and slide it all the way through and pull it through that last chain at the top and then chain 1 to secure the stitch. Then to start the next stitch, you need to make sure you skip that chain that you worked the double crochet into, find the next chain along and then the one after that. So you'll actually be working in the 2nd chain along and you're going to put in another double crochet. Chain 1 at the top of your double crochet again, and then you're going to go into that chain that you just skipped and again make a puff stitch. So yarn over, go straight into that chain, yarn over, pull up. Then repeat that 3 more times. So I'm doing 4 repeats per puff stitch, and just make sure you're keeping that tension so you can pull that up to create an even puff stitch each time. This is definitely the trickiest row because you haven't got as much to hold on to with the chain. But once you're done there with that 2nd puff stitch, yarn over and pull through. You might find that sometimes when you're pulling through, it goes more smoothly than others. If you're using cotton like I am, sometimes the yarn can slightly unravel in places and you pick up little catches. So just work your way through, or if it really goes wrong, just start the puff stitch again. So now for that 2nd puff stitch we made, repeat that process 2 more times. So skip 1, work in the 2nd one for a double crochet, put in your puff stitch, and then when you get to the end here you're going to have this 1 chain left, and here you just put in a double crochet exactly like I'm doing at the moment, and that just finishes off the end of the row. So now you've done row 1, you have your braided 4 puff stitches, and we're going to start row 2. So chain 3 and then turn your work. So now you're working into 2 different spaces on that first row. In between each of your puff stitches you can see you've got these gaps. So you're going to work into that 2nd gap there and put in your double crochet. then chain 1 at the top of your double crochet as before, and go back and find that first space. And in here you're going to put in your puff stitch. So now yarn all the way through and chain 1 to secure that puff stitch. Now the next space is between that second and third puff stitch, and that's where you're going to put in your next double crochet and then chain 1 to secure, and then you're going to go back and work into that space, putting a puff stitch in between the first and second of the previous row. I actually always find it harder to pull up properly on this first row, so have a couple of goes if you need to, and you'll find that as you continue with each row it'll get easier and easier because you'll get used to the amount of tension that you need. Now for the next one, you're going to go into the space between the third and the fourth puff stitch of the previous row, and you're going to put in your double crochet, chain 1, and then put your puff stitch in between the second and third. Then for this last one, the space you need to work into is actually that 3 chain space at the end. So find that 3 chain loop and work your double crochet into that space. Then your puff stitch is going to go in between the third and fourth of the previous row. Now this is a classic example of where it gets nice and stuck. If I just slightly put my crochet hook at the wrong angle or I catch something, it's a bit of a nightmare, but just persevere and you will start getting through them much more easily. So to finish off this second row, what you're going to do is put a double crochet into that 3 chain space at the end again where you worked before, and that will create the nice straight line at the end of the row. Now on that one I just done the puff stitch a little bit tight and a few stitches had started to stick out from the pattern underneath, so I just tucked them back in. So for the rest of the rows you are just going to repeat what you did for row 2. So chain 3, turn your work and repeat the steps in the previous row. Now I did 14 rows in total for the length of the bookmark, and when you have as many rows as you want, chain 1 at the end of the row and pull through, and then cut off that yarn tail as a nice long yarn tail to sew in. So in case it's useful, I'll just show you how I weave it in through the puff stitches to finish off those 2 yarn tails. So I'm just weaving down the side, and then I'm going to weave in a couple of different directions, going through a couple of different puff stitches, and then I'll pull through and cut off with a pair of scissors, and the yarn tail will slide back into those puff stitches and stay nice and secure and hidden in your work. So here I was having a little bit of a debate with myself about where to go, but what I decided was to put it through one more puff stitch. Here I'm just making sure I've gone under all of the threads from the previous puff stitch, and then I'm going to pull through the second one and then cut off the yarn tail. Okay, so that's all done, and I'm just going to weave in the starting yarn tail and then we can add the tassels. So you need something to wrap around to make the tassels, and something I found that was just the right size for me was this box of plasters so that I just had lying around. So what you're going to do is hold one side against and then wrap around 5 times, and then have that yarn dangle at the bottom and cut it off, and then holding those yarn ends against the box, you're just going to slide your scissors underneath and chop off at the top. My scissors are way too blunt now. I've realised I need to get myself a new pair, but I'm lazy at the moment, so I am going to get some better fabric scissors so they actually cut through yarn. So when you're done, just grab that top section, so you've got them dangling like this, and that is what we're going to pull through into your work. So grab your bookmark, grab your crochet needle, and I'm going to work into that very last row that we did. Go onto those chains that are just above the puff stitch, and that's the first row where you started with a chain. I think that looks neater, so I like to leave that one, and I prefer to work into this last row. And so here what you're going to do is put those strands of yarn over your crochet hook, and you're just going to pull them all the way through. Now pull up a loop that's big enough for you to get your thumb and forefinger through, and then what you're going to do is pick up the tails of the yarn from the other side and pull them all the way through. Then pull that gradually through and eventually pull it tight at the bottom, and this is what I think of as the front of the bookmark, where it pulls through like this with the tassels. Just make sure that's nice and secure and tight, and then you have one of your tassels complete. So I'm going to put in 4 in total, working under those chains, and that will sit nicely with the rectangle shape at the bottom of the bookmark. And this is when it's done. So here it's got the 4 tassels. Now with my previous one that I made, I just chopped off the ends to a better length. But with this one, I'm going to make a slightly diagonal cut, so it's got a slightly more like boho kind of feel. And the way I do this is really simply just pulling on the yarn tails like you're cutting somebody's hair between my fingers, and then I'm just going to chop off at a diagonal angle. So you'd think I'd have learnt my lesson, but I hadn't. And yes, the scissors are still blunt, so they wouldn't cut through. So I almost made it in the diagonal line you can see, but then what I had to do was go back and get some sharper scissors. So I'm just going to do a second trim to neaten up that line. And I find doing this bit so satisfying. It's literally like cutting somebody's hair. I love doing it. So this is a really fun step for me. And then what you want to do is to make that triangle shape at the bottom, you could pull the opposite way around, but here I just kind of freeformed it, and I went to the length of the shortest part on the side that I'd already cut, and I cut another diagonal line going back up. I'm not sure that's the most efficient way to do it, but it kind of worked out, so it was okay. And then you've got this lovely diagonal shape at the bottom, and I really like the way that looks. So once you finish cutting the tassels at the bottom, you're finished. And it really is as easy as that. This was a really quick project I really enjoyed making. They're very useful, and I think they make really good presents if you've got a bookworm in the family or a friend. And I love doing this chunky braid stitch. I think it's really nice. So I really hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please do give me a thumbs up and subscribe. That would be amazing, and I hope to see you at the next video.